The first sign was not a cry, nor smoke upon the horizon, but a silence too deep for comfort. In the high chambers of Kara's Galadhon, Galadriel paused at her mirror pool, and for the first time in many long years, the water did not reflect the stars. It reflected only dark roots coiling in endless circles, as if the forest itself were strangling its own heart. A faint thrum rose from beneath the surface, like the pulse of a stone heart buried far beneath soil. Her hand hovered above the water, pale fingers trembling not with fear, but with recognition. Some things the world tried to forget, others returned when memory itself was wounded. She whispered the name she had not spoken in an age. Fôgenollë. The word seemed to thicken the air. The chamber darkened though the lamps still burned. A raven winged past the balcony, dropping a single feather blacker than midnight. It landed beside the pool with a hiss, as if scorched by unseen fire. Galadriel rose, her white gown flowing like water over marble. A presence already stirred at the edges of her thoughts, something old, patient, and malicious. She had faced shadows before, but this one was different. This was not the roar of war or the crash of iron against iron. This was a whisper that threaded itself through memory, a corruption that twisted remembrance into chains. By dawn, she summoned a small company. Amroth came first, tall and steady, his hair golden as autumn fields, his eyes sharpened by both sorrow and loyalty. He bowed but wasted no words, for he too had felt the shudder in the land. Then Eowel arrived, a dwarf with broad shoulders dusted by soot, his beard woven with copper beads blackened from the forge. He carried himself like stone weathered by centuries, solid, weary, unwilling to bend. He muttered as he entered the chamber, elves speak of whispers. I say the earth groans. Yet his eyes betrayed concern. He had been drawn not by friendship, but by instinct. A miner knows when the ground is sick. Others gathered, scouts, healers, keepers of lore. But Galadriel lifted her hand. No host, she said. This is a root wound. Steel will not heal it. We must move as shadows do, silent and unseen. A hush fell, as though the chamber itself agreed. From her hand, she drew a small vial. Inside shimmered a single drop of silver light, captured long ago from Nimrdel's spring. It pulsed faintly, like a sleeping star. This is not a weapon, she told them, but a key. It will reveal what lies hidden. Yet revelation alone does not free us. We must endure what is shown. Her gaze lingered on each face, weighing the cost of what lay ahead. Amroth's jaw was firm. Eowel crossed his arms, muttering about fool errands, yet neither turned away. At dusk, the company departed. The forest swallowed them as they passed beyond the golden borders of Lothlorien. At first, the trees leaned close in reverence, branches whispering blessings. But as they drew nearer to the eastern marches, the air grew colder. Birds vanished. The light bent strangely, as though each beam of sun were caught and strangled by unseen fingers. On the second night, their campfire burned low, spitting sparks that died before they touched the air. Amroth sat sharpening his blade, his eyes fixed eastward. Eowel traced runes into the dirt, warding symbols against spirits. The silence pressed so heavy that even Galadriel's voice seemed to echo. Do you feel it? She asked quietly. Amroth nodded. It is like walking inside a song where only one note is played. Aye, Eowel muttered. And that note is a grave bell. Galadriel looked into the darkness beyond the fire. Her thoughts brushed against something vast, an unseen watcher, waiting. The whisper returned, stronger this time, curling around her mind like smoke. Come. Remember. Bind. She closed her eyes and saw a vision. A black tree rising from a valley floor, its branches dripping crimson fruit, its roots tangled around a gem that pulsed like a living wound. Faces flickered in its glow, men, elves, dwarves, all hollow-eyed, their memory stripped bare, their names bound to silence. When she opened her eyes, the forest around them seemed to lean closer. We go to Fôgenollë, Galadriel said, her voice carrying both command and lament. There a relic waits, one that feeds not on blood but on memory. If it wakes fully, it will chain not just lives, but the very song of Arda. No one answered. The crackle of the dying fire was the only reply. Yet each knew that turning back was no longer possible. In the distance, a raven cried once, harsh and hollow. The forest held its breath. The journey into shadow had begun. The third day carried them into the eastern marches where the land itself seemed altered. Roots broke through the path in warped spirals, like ribs clawing up from the earth. The air was damp and cold, thick with the smell of resin and decay. Light filtered through the canopy in fractured shards, pale and uneasy, as though the sun itself hesitated to gaze upon this place. Amroth moved ahead, bow drawn loosely, his every step precise. The tension in his shoulders betrayed what his calm face tried to conceal. Aol trudged behind him, muttering curses under his beard as he struck roots with the butt of his axe. This wood don't grow like any honest soil I've seen. It listens. It watches. Galadriel walked at the center, her presence the only steady flame in a gathering storm. Her eyes swept the trees, tracing scars in bark that seemed too deliberate to be natural. More than once she paused, laying her palm upon the wood, listening. At first it was silence. Then, faintly, a low hum, like a string pulled taut beneath the soil. At dusk, they reached a clearing. In its center, a circle of earth had been stripped bare, black as if scorched, though no ash or fire mark remained. Around its edge, small white stones jutted from the ground, arranged in a pattern too exact to be chance. Amroth crouched, brushing soil between his fingers. Warding stones, he murmured. But broken. Whoever placed them tried to bind something, and failed. Aol spat into the dirt. No dwarf laid these. They're elf-make, old and wrong. You bind what should be buried, it festers. Same as sealing rot in a mine, it finds a way out. Galadriel knelt, her hand hovering above the circle. A tremor traveled through her skin. Memory, not her own, but stolen, flashed across her mind. A soldier's scream, a cradle overturned, a tower burning beneath a red sky. The images clung to her like cobwebs, whispering remember. Remember. Her breath hitched before she pulled away. This is not a place of death, she said softly. It is a place of theft. Memory torn from the living, forced to repeat itself until it curdles. Silence fell heavy. The fire they kindled that night was small, its smoke curling low to the ground as if afraid to rise. Around the flames, Amroth spoke first. Why Fôgenollë? What roots here that even the wise feared to name? Galadriel's gaze lingered on the vial of silver light resting in her lap. She chose her words carefully. Once, in the age when the first shadows fell, there was a servant of the dark power who feared death more than defeat. Udunareth, he was called. His body perished, but his will bound itself into a gem he had fashioned, a prison of memory. It was hidden beneath these roots, buried deep, guarded by silence. Until now. Aol's eyes narrowed. A gem that feeds on memory? Dangerous thing. Stronger than blade or fire. For memory never dies, it only waits. Amroth frowned. And if this Udunareth wakes? Then memory itself becomes a weapon, Galadriel answered. Every sorrow, every loss, every wound, reshaped into chains. The dwarf snorted, though his voice carried no jest. And fools like us walk straight toward it. No one laughed. That night, sleep came pearly. Amroth dreamt of the sea, endless and black, swallowing the voices of his kin. Aol woke with a start, swearing he'd heard the pickaxes of his ancestors clanging in the dark. Even Galadriel, whose will was like tempered steel, stirred with unease. In her dream, she saw a tree of black glass dripping red fruit, each fruit bearing a face she knew, faces of her kin, her people, their eyes hollowed by obedience. At dawn, the forest was already awake. Vines had crept closer to their camp, coiling like fingers around their supplies. When Aol tried to hack one free, sap bled black and hissed in the fire, spitting sparks. Alive, he muttered. And angry. Galadriel stood, her cloak catching faint light. The forest is no longer merely forest. It has become an echo chamber for the gem. What is bound beneath the tree now bleeds into every branch. They pressed forward, the trees tightening around them. No bird sang, no wind stirred. Yet the hush was not empty, it thrummed with anticipation, as though the wood itself awaited a command. By midday, they crested a ridge. Below them spread a hollow glade. At its center loomed a tree unlike any other, its bark black as obsidian, its branches drooping like talons. Crimson fruit hung from its limbs, glowing faintly even in the daylight. Roots the size of serpents coiled outward, clutching the soil in a grotesque embrace. Amroth's breath caught. The black tree. Aol crossed his arms, face pale beneath his beard. No tree grows so by itself. Something feeds it. Galadriel's eyes fixed upon the roots, where faint red light pulsed, in rhythm with the thrum she had felt since the mirror pool. She knew then, the relic was not asleep. It was waking. And it had already noticed them. The black tree loomed before them, its vast trunk glistening as though slick with oil. Each crimson fruit swayed despite the stillness of the air, their surfaces gleaming like eyes half open. Beneath its roots, the soil bulged as though something inside struggled to breathe. Galadriel felt it first, a whisper threading directly into her mind, not in words, but in memories. She blinked, and suddenly the glade was filled with shadows of the past, her daughter Celebrian laughing in Rivendell's gardens, then crying out in pain, Finrod's body broken in the dungeons of Sauron, the hosts of her kin crossing the grinding ice. Faces pale with cold. Each memory sharpened until it cut. Her knees nearly buckled. Only Amroth's hand on her arm steadied her. "My lady," she forced herself to breathe, though her voice shook. "It knows me." Aol cursed, stepping forward with his axe raised. "Then let me cut it down." Before Galadriel could stop him, he swung at one of the serpent-like roots. The blade bit deep and black sap spurted forth, hissing as it struck the ground. At once the fruit above quivered, and the earth itself shuddered. The clearing erupted. Roots lashed upward, striking like whips. Vines shot from the ground, wrapping around Aol's legs, yanking him down. He roared and hacked wildly, but for each tendril he severed, two more coiled tighter. Amroth loosed arrow after arrow, shafts striking with bursts of dark sap, yet the tree only writhed harder, as though feeding on the attack. "Hold!" Galadriel cried, her voice ringing like steel. "Force strengthens it." The air grew thick, pressing against their chests. The crimson fruit glowed brighter, pulsing in rhythm with a deep heartbeat from beneath the roots. A fissure split the earth at the tree's base, and out of it stepped a figure. It was tall, draped in tattered robes that moved without wind, its face hidden behind a silver mask shaped like a bird's skull. The voice that filled the clearing was not spoken but planted directly into their thoughts. "I am Udunareth," it said, the sound layered like overlapping echoes. "Warden of memory. Keeper of what you would forget." Amroth's bow faltered. You should be long dead." The mask tilted slightly. "Death is for the nameless. I am remembered, and so I endure." Galadriel's heart clenched. She felt the relic beneath the roots stir, a gemstone thrumming with malevolent intent. It did not merely hold memory, it consumed it, twisted it, replayed it endlessly until the living broke beneath its weight. Udunareth extended a skeletal hand toward her. "Lady of Light, you of all should see. Your people fade. Their names slip from the tongues of men. Their deeds rot in dust. But I can grant permanence. Bind yourself to me, and every memory shall endure. No more fading songs. No more loss." The gem beneath the tree flared. Visions assaulted her, halls of elves eternal, their faces never forgotten, their names carved forever in living stone. No sorrow of exile, no grief of fading. Power not for conquest, but for remembrance. Her breath caught. A single tear burned down her cheek. For one moment, the offer did not seem monstrous. It seemed merciful. "Galadriel." Amroth's voice cut through the haze, urgent and steady. "This is not truth. This is prison." But another voice whispered inside her mind, her own voice, laced with doubt. "If the world forgets us, are we not already gone?" Aol snarled, straining against the vines that bound him. "Don't listen, Elf Queen. Bind yourself to that thing and you'll chain us all." The warden's mask gleamed. "Chains? No. Anchors. To keep the world from drifting into oblivion." Galadriel's hand hovered near the vial at her side, the last drop of Nimrdel's light glimmering faintly. But her other hand trembled toward the relic, drawn by the aching promise it offered. Her heart warred within her, the desperate longing to preserve her people's memory, and the deeper knowledge that such preservation through fear was corruption. Her voice cracked when she spoke. "If I refuse?" Udunareth's answer was soft as ash falling. "Then you, too, will be forgotten." For a heartbeat, she faltered. The company's eyes, Amroth's fierce loyalty, Aol's stubborn defiance, burned into her. The relic's glow reflected in her pupils, painting her face half gold, half red. Then she turned away from the mask, raising her voice so even the roots trembled. "Better to fade in truth than endure in chains." The warden shrieked, a sound that cracked branches and curdled the air. The earth split wider, revealing a stairwell spiraling down into darkness. The gem pulsed brighter, calling them inward. Galadriel steadied herself, her will taut as a drawn bowstring. "This ends below. Come." Amroth knocked an arrow, face grim. Aol tore free of the vines with a roar. Together they followed her as she stepped into the chasm. The choice had been made, but the cost of it had only begun to show. The stairwell yawned downward, swallowing them into the earth. Each step carried them deeper into a silence that was not absence, but suffocation. The air grew dense, tasting of rust and damp stone, as though centuries of unspoken words had fermented here. A faint red glow pulsed up from below, sinking with their heartbeats until it felt less like they were descending toward the gem and more like the gem was pulling them down. Aol spat, his boots grinding against the ancient stone. "This isn't a passage made for walking. It's a throat. We're being swallowed." "Then let us see what it digests," Galadriel murmured, though her voice trembled in the heavy dark. Amroth touched her arm lightly. "You faltered above. You nearly," he cut himself short, searching her eyes. "Tell me it will not sway you again." Her gaze met his, steady but shadowed. "It already has. The danger is not that I cannot be swayed. It is that part of me wants what it offers." The words landed like a stone dropped in still water. Aol grunted, his usual defiance muted. "Then you'd best decide quick, Elf Queen. 'Cause down there, you won't have the time to think." They emerged into a cavern vast as a cathedral. The roots of the black tree pierced the ceiling and walls, thick as columns, glowing faintly with veins of crimson light. At the chamber's center rose the relic, a gem the size of a heart, cradled in tangled roots. It pulsed in the dark, its glow washing the chamber in a rhythm that felt too alive. Before it stood Udunareth, silver mask gleaming in the bloody light. His voice pressed into their skulls without breath or tongue. "You descend, though you know dissent is surrender." "Admirable." "Foolish." Aol raised his axe, but Galadriel's hand stopped him. "Steel cannot sever memory." Udunareth tilted his head. "Wise. Then let us speak plainly, Lady of Light. You crave what I offer. To preserve. To endure. To make the world remember." The gem flared, and visions tore through Galadriel. She saw her kin Finrod, Celebrian, even Fëanor himself all alive, their names sung on every tongue. She saw a kingdom unbroken, a people eternal, her own face crowned, radiant, adored. It was intoxicating, and for a moment she swayed toward the relic, her hand trembling midair. "Galadriel!" Amroth's shout cracked through the vision. He stepped between her and the gem, his bow lowered. His eyes shone not with accusation but with pleading. "If you bind yourself to this, you bind us. Is our memory not enough? Must you enslave the world just to ease your grief?" Her lips parted, words faltering. She wanted to deny it, to claim her will was stronger, but she could not. Tears welled unbidden. "I am so tired, Amroth. Tired of fading. Tired of watching what I love dissolve into silence. If memory dies, what is left of us?" Aol slammed the butt of his axe against the stone. "What's left? The living. The breathing. We're here, curse it. You think names carved in rock matter more than us standing beside you now." The dwarf's fury broke something inside her. She pressed a hand to her chest, torn between longing and shame. The gem's glow throbbed faster, feeding on her hesitation. Udunareth's voice slid closer, silk over steel. See how even they admit it, memory fades. But I can give you permanence. Take me, and none shall forget. Not ever. Galadriel's hand hovered near the vial at her side, the last drop of Nimrodell's light trembling within. It was a fragile flame against an ocean of shadow. Could it be enough? Or would it vanish like a spark in a storm? Amroth reached for her hand, his voice quiet now, almost breaking. You are not alone in this. Do not let it tell you that you are. Even if the world forgets us, we remain in each other. That is memory enough. For a long moment, Galadriel said nothing. Her eyes stayed locked on the gem, her breath shallow, her body rigid as if caught between two worlds. The roots stirred, tightening, the cavern trembling. Udunareth's mask gleamed brighter. Choose, Lady of Light. Chain or fade. There is no middle path. Galadriel closed her eyes. Her hand tightened around the vial. When she opened them again, her gaze was fire. There is always another path. One you fear, because it frees rather than binds. She stepped forward. The chamber roared as the gem flared violently, the roots striking like serpents. Aol swung his axe, Amroth loosed arrow after arrow, buying her the breath she needed. And Galadriel lifted the vial high, preparing to cast its last light into the heart of dread. The moment of decision had come. The cavern convulsed like a living lung, roots writhing as the gem's pulse became a thunderous heartbeat. The red glow filled every crevice, staining the air itself. Galadriel stepped forward, vial raised. The single drop of silver light swirled within, fragile as frost, yet blazing with defiance against the crimson dark. Udunareth's voice crashed over her, no longer a whisper but a storm. Do you think a drop can quench an ocean? Memory is endless. Loss eternal. You cannot unmake me. Roots whipped across the chamber, slamming into the stone where she had stood a breath earlier. Amroth loosed arrow after arrow, shafts bursting into sparks of black sap. Aol hacked furiously, his axe carving deep grooves into the serpentine coils, but still they surged. Galadriel's heart hammered. The relic's visions pressed against her skull, harder now, desperate. She saw her daughter again, safe and smiling. She saw Finrod alive, laughing beside her. She saw her people triumphant, their names sung across eternity. It was a paradise painted in crimson, and it ached with longing. For a moment her steps faltered. Udunareth seized the weakness, his voice curling like a knife. Take it, Galadriel. Make the choice no one else is brave enough to. Bind the world to memory, and it will never again abandon you. Her hand shook. The vial trembled. Then Amroth's cry cut through the storm. If you chain the world to memory, you chain us too. Look at me, look at us. She turned. His eyes met hers, steady though blood ran from a cut at his brow. Behind him, Aol roared, holding back a crushing root with brute strength, his body straining, his beard matted with sweat. Both men, mortal and dwarf, stood not for eternity, but for the fragile now. Her breath caught. Memory without love was hollow. Eternity without choice was a prison. To preserve her people by force would be no salvation, it would be the death of all she sought to protect. Her voice rose, steady and resonant, carrying through the cavern. Better to fade in truth than endure in chains. She hurled the vial. The drop of Nimrodell's light struck the gem with a sound like a bell tolling across eternity. For an instant nothing happened. Then a crack splintered across the relic's surface. Udunareth screamed. The sound was not mortal. It was the shriek of countless stolen voices, memories being torn free from their prison. Roots thrashed wildly, smashing into walls, pulling free chunks of stone. Amroth was thrown against the ground, his bow shattering. Aol bellowed as vines coiled around his chest, squeezing the breath from him. Galadriel pressed forward, hair whipping in the storm of force, her eyes burning with silver fire. She raised her hands and spoke a word, one older than the world, a word of unmaking. The crack widened. Light spilled out, searing white, pushing against the crimson glow. The gem shattered in a burst that blinded the cavern, shards flying like burning stars. Udunareth staggered. His silver mask split down the middle. Beneath was no face, only darkness held together by will. His voice fractured, faltering. You would let them forget? You would let them die. Galadriel stood tall, her hair glowing with the light that poured from the broken gem. Better to die free and be remembered by love than live enslaved and be remembered by fear. The last crack split him. Udunareth's form unraveled into ash and shadow, dissolving into the ground with a final echoing cry. The cavern shuddered. Roots collapsed inward, blackened and brittle. The great gem's fragments dimmed, their glow fading until only smoke remained. Silence followed, deafening, absolute. Galadriel sank to her knees, her body trembling, her spirit raw. The vial shattered, its last gift spent. She pressed her palm against the cold stone, whispering a prayer not of triumph but of release. Amroth crawled to her side, clutching his ribs, his breath ragged. It is done. Aol stumbled free of the dying vines, his face pale but defiant. He kicked a shard of the relic, watching it crumble to dust. But the ground will never forget what slept here. Galadriel lifted her eyes to the ceiling where faint daylight seeped through cracks. Tears streaked her cheeks, but her gaze was resolute. The relic was broken. Udunareth was gone. The forest above would breathe again. But she knew the truth in her bones. Shadows never vanish. They scatter, waiting, lingering in shards and whispers. Still, she rose. Her voice, hoarse but firm, echoed through the cavern. Let the shadow fear us now. The first breath of dawn found them climbing from the shattered cavern into the glade above. Where once the black tree had loomed, only a husk remained. Its bark had gone brittle, gray as bone. The crimson fruit, once gleaming like wet hearts, lay shriveled in the dirt, leaking only sap that steamed and vanished in the morning air. Birds perched timidly on branches nearby, as though testing whether the forest was safe to sing again. Galadriel stood in the center of the ruin, her hair still streaked with silver glow, her face pale but unbowed. Every muscle in her body ached. Yet deeper than the weariness was a hollowness, the knowledge of what she had refused. Amroth approached, his arm bound with a torn strip of cloth. He bowed his head. You saved more than this forest. If that gem had spread its roots beyond Fôgenollë, all of Middle-earth might have drowned in memory. But Galadriel did not smile. Her gaze lingered on the brittle roots, still twisted in grotesque shapes. And yet, for a moment, I wished it. Amroth's brow furrowed, but he said nothing. He did not need to. Aol trudged forward, dragging his axe behind him. He kicked a fragment of blackened root, spitting on it. Don't fool yourself. That warden wasn't just some leftover sorcerer. That was the earth showing us what happens when memory curdles. You beat it for now. But ground like this? It remembers. Shadows always seep back. Galadriel looked down at the soil, and in its quiet she felt the truth. The gem was shattered, Udunareth unmade, but the shards, the whispers, the temptation, would not be gone forever. The shadow's nature was persistence. They spent the day building cairns. Aol carved runes into flat stones and placed them around the glade, not as triumph but as warning. Amroth buried the shattered bow of one of the scouts who had not returned, laying it gently as though to honor all who had been consumed here. Galadriel herself gathered the smallest shard of the relic, a sliver that had resisted turning to dust. It burned faintly against her palm, no longer strong enough to sing, but alive enough to trouble her heart. She wrapped it in a cloth of starlight and placed it inside an iron coffer. This fragment would not remain in Middle-earth, not if she could help it. One day it would sail west, beyond the circles of the world, or be buried where even memory could not find it. At twilight, the three companions stood at the edge of the glade. The air smelled cleaner, though still heavy with ash. The wind stirred, carrying with it the faintest sound of birdsong, a hesitant note of renewal. Amroth broke the silence. What did you see, my lady, when it tried to bind you? Galadriel closed her eyes. For a moment she could almost feel it again, her kin alive, her people eternal, their names never lost. A kingdom unbroken by time or grief. She swallowed hard. I saw what I desired most. And I saw that desire turned into a weapon. Her voice was quiet, yet it carried weight enough to still the forest. AOL shook his head, his tone rough but not unkind. That's how it always works. The dark don't need to tempt us with what we hate. It tempts us with what we love. The truth of it settled heavy in the dusk. Night came. They made camp beneath the open stars, the first they had seen unobscured in days. Galadriel sat apart from the fire, her eyes fixed eastward. Shadows pooled there still, beyond sight, beyond hearing. She knew this victory was but a pause. Darkness had patience, and memory was endless. Yet she also knew something else. She had not been alone in the cavern. She had faltered, but she had been reminded by Amroth's loyalty, by AOL's defiance, that memory was not meant to enslave. It was meant to be carried in living hearts, fragile and free. At dawn, they would return to Lothlorien. Reports would be sent, warnings carved into song and stone. But tonight, for the first time in many nights, she allowed herself to sing not a song of triumph, but of release. A low hymn, soft as breath, weaving through the trees. The forest listened. Slowly, tentatively, it answered. Galadriel's voice carried into the dark, her final vow unspoken yet felt. Let the shadow scatter. Let it whisper. When it returns, I will be waiting. And so the Lady of Light walked out of Fôgenollë not as a conqueror, but as a guardian, scarred by temptation, tempered by defiance, and bound to watch until the end of days.